Very good morning. You're watching News 9 Live. I'm Karthik Malhotra, and over the next 1 hour, everything that's happening in India and the world, which is going to impact your wallet, whether you're a trader, an investor, or a citizen. You're watching Morning Brief at 9, and on the show today, we'll be joined by Andrew Holland and Avni Bhatt to deconstruct everything that's happening in the markets and beyond. This is Morning Brief at 9, and a look at the top stories making headlines today. India's wholesale price index, or WPI, inflation eases to 1.89% in November amid rising food and manufacturing prices, as per the Commerce Ministry. India's private sector output hits a 4-month high as PMI, or the Purchasing Managers Index, rises to 60.7, driven by strong demand and record job growth. But India's exports fall 4.85% to just $32.11 billion in November. Trade deficit reaches a record $37.84 billion. This because of a surge in gold imports. The GST Council, as per media reports, is considering a reduction on tax on food delivery to 5% from 18%. Mukesh Ambani and Gautam Adani have dropped out of Bloomberg's $100 billion club amid business challenges, while India's top 20 billionaires add $67.3 billion in 2024. Ola Electric has become the first Indian electric vehicle maker to achieve a 400,000 sales mark in this year, surpassing a 7,75,000 cumulative units since launch. And the story of women empowerment. Tata Steel has launched India's first all-women shift at its iron mine in Jharkhand, empowering women in heavy mining operations. India and Sri Lanka strengthen defense and energy ties, focus on connectivity and economic growth during Prime Minister Modi's talks with the Sri Lankan Prime Minister. But New Delhi has reactivated the Stage 4 pollution measures as AQI surpasses well over 400. In fact, it touched 500 in a few places this morning. Schools have been instructed to implement hybrid learning amid the crisis. And the big developing story, which will actually unfold India time tonight, is the US Federal Reserve's meeting, which is going to begin today in the US, and markets around the globe are expecting a 25 basis points cut. The Fed Reserve is set to make its final interest rate decision of 2024 this Wednesday, which is tomorrow US time, with expectations for a third consecutive rate cut. Now, this follows a major move in September when the central bank in the US reduced rates for the first time in 4 years, providing a much needed relief to borrowers amid ongoing inflation concerns. Remember, US inflation came at a 2.7% print. Joining us on the show now is Andrew Holland. Andrew Holland, good morning. Thank you very much for taking out time this morning. Help us understand the US Fed, the central bank's FOMC meeting. What are you expecting of it, and how should an Indian citizen really be concerned about what the US Fed does?
Well, I mean, in terms of what the Fed will do, I think everyone's expecting that 25 basis points rate cut. Maybe there'll be a little bit more of a hawkish statement around it because, the economy is still strong, inflation remains elevated. And I think, going into the new year, obviously you have President-elect Trump, taking over as the U.S. administration. So, that will bring its own challenges, I think, for the Federal Reserve going forward. But for India, obviously, it gives us the opportunity in February for the RBI to cut interest rates here, which obviously would help people in terms of lower loan repayments and EMIs going forward. So that would be the beneficiary of another rate cut by the Federal Reserve this week.
Okay, Andrew, do you still believe that India's rate decisions are still coupled with the US? Because last two cycles in the US, which started with rate cut, is not something that India followed. So is it fair to assume that India is still going to follow its own independent inflation mark trajectory on rate decisions and not really be concerned with what happens in the US?
See, I think we can't kind of ignore what's happening around the world in terms of interest rate cuts. Because obviously it has an impact on the currency at some point as well. You probably don't want your currency strengthening, going forward if everyone is reducing rates. So that's one point. I think for India, obviously, food inflation remains the mainstay of the higher inflation. So until that comes down, then it's going to be tough for the RBI to take, kind of aggressive action. But that said, the economy is slowing very quickly, and I think the new RBI governor, has the opportunity to kind of think pro-growth and pro-business. So therefore, maybe ignoring some of the inflation upticks at the moment and saying that food inflation will come under control over time, and therefore we need to help boost the economy and kickstart animal spirits with corporates in terms of investments as well.
Right, animal spirits, that is something that, of course, we have been talking about here, and we need the capex cycle to kickstart. But I want to shift focus, Andrew, now to the inflation data which came out yesterday. Following the trend of the CPI inflation, India's wholesale price index based inflation, or WPI, has also eased now to 1.89%, well below the 2% threshold in the month of November, and this largely by a rise in prices of food articles, food products, textiles, machinery and some manufacturing goods. Now, WPI inflation was lower at 0.39% in November last year, 2023, while if you look at it month on month, it stood at 2.36% in the month of October. Meanwhile, the month on month change in the WPI for November came in at a negative of 0.06% compared to October. So what do you make of the inflation data at this moment? And therefore, is it still too early, Andrew, to assume that there is a trend line of inflation declining? Because inflation has been up and down, a bit volatile for the last few months.
I think you just highlighted that the real key here is the volatility in food prices, which is obviously not given comfort levels to the RBI up until now. I think if this trend continues of maybe benign inflation in terms of food inflation, then that opportunity, as I said, in February for the new RBI governor to cut rates, I think is very much in play. So I would think that we could go for 25 basis points in February, depending on what happens in the US. Possibly you could go a little bit more as well. But I think the good news is that when you come to that meeting in February, is that you'll have some of the indications of the policies of President-elect Trump as well, to bear in mind of what you need to do to kind of keep our economy, kind of growing at. I mean, the RBI says 6.8% for this year. I think it's going to be nearer that 6%. So, there is a big slowdown. So there has to be some action taken, and I think interest rates will be one of them.
All right, Andrew, let's move now to the private sector. You had mentioned animal spirits and the hopeful revival in the capex cycle, but India's private sector output has grown at the fastest pace in 4 months, according to a survey, helping the economy end 2024, hopefully on a positive note. And this largely is underpinned by a more robust demand in services and manufacturing. And the job growth has also, according to data, been fairly robust. Now, according to HSBC's December flash, the India Composite PMI, or Purchasing Managers Index, which is compiled by S&P Global, has risen to 60.7 this month. Now, this is in fact matching August reading after it had dipped in the month of October or November to 58.6. While Asia's third largest economy grew a softer 5.4% in the last quarter, easing inflation and private sector resilience are expected to further boost demand and improve the outlook for next year. Is that true? Are you expecting a better outlook for next year, given that manufacturing has continued to stay above 50, which means there has been growth and now touching the 60 plus levels?
There's a couple of factors. I think, first of all, we'll have to start to see the government expenditure start to pick up, because obviously that will have a multiplier effect. Now, we know that the first half of the year has been pretty benign, so everyone's been hoping for the pickup in the second half of the year, but we're still awaiting that. So some of that multiplier effect, won't be felt till late 2025, as soon as they do that. And of course, once that happens, then of course the private sector starts to pick up as well. So I think with that boost from the government, an interest rate cut and possibility of more interest rate cuts from the RBI going forward in 2025, that I think will push corporates to pick up expenditure across many different industries. And I think there's the manufacturing industry, the kind of electronic manufacturing industry, I think that's where we're going to start to see a lot more investments, not just by local Indian companies, but by foreign companies as well. So FDI should start to pick up in this area. And I think one of the things I'm picking up from the government is that, tourism in India is something that they want to focus on. And again, that could be, very good news, not just in terms of employment, but if you think about pre-COVID, foreign tourists is still, I think, below pre-COVID, kind of time. So there's an opportunity there, to bring in, obviously, money from people spending in India, but also help grow jobs in the future. So I think that if they concentrate on those two sectors, it's good for jobs, it's good for the economy, and it would be good for, for corporate India as well.
You, Andrew, and I think what you're saying is absolutely logical at this point, because we are at record outbound travel, but pre-COVID levels and below for inbound travel coming into India. So we definitely need the US dollar, the greenback, to flow into India. But unfortunately, that is not something which is being reflected in India's export story. In fact, going back to data, India's exports have contracted by almost 5%, 4.85% or so year on year in the month of November, totaling about $32.11 billion, while the trade deficit has now widened to a record high of $37.84 billion. And guess what's driving this surge in imports? Well, none other than the yellow metal gold. Now, this decline has actually followed a period of double-digit growth in the month of October. Andrew, help me understand, what is the fascination with India importing gold at a time when gold in any case is touching its own record highs?
Yeah, well, we all know trying to get hotel rooms or even trying to book any events at the moment is a no-go because of all the weddings which are going on, and obviously,
the traffic is another story. It's not just the hotel rooms. Go ahead, Andrew.
Exactly. So that gold demand is there. I think also people are looking at gold as an investment. It's done very well over the past year, in terms of against the stock markets and other kind of alternate assets. So, in a kind of a year, maybe in 2025, with some uncertainty as well, globally, then you would see that demand for gold remain strong. I think for the export side of for India, Europe's in a bit of a mess at the moment, both politically and in terms of the economic outlook, and the UK included in that. So there's a bit of a sharp slowdown there, and that's why you see more aggressive rate cuts in Europe. And of course, for the US, it's a growing area for India, but it's not really overtaking China at this point. So I think there's a long way to go on the export side, but I think the story is more of electronic manufacturing, textiles. I think there's an opportunity there, and then trying to get some inbound foreign direct investment as well as tourism.
Right. So I don't know, maybe it's a little early right now, but do you think some relaxation in FDI norms and making taxation a little more lucrative is something that Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman will perhaps consider in her first February budget speech?
Yeah, it's always a tough one. I'm sure we're going to play up the budget and all the expectations there. There's one trend which I think we kind of ignore. We always think about the positive side of tax, right? But obviously we did see an increase in capital gains tax, and I'm just wondering if that's going to be a continuing element of increasing taxation revenues for the government. So. On one side, I can see what you're saying. I don't think we'll see so much in this budget in terms of tax reforms, but the stock market might be one area which they continue to look at.
All right. Well, let's stay on the tax story for just a little longer, Andrew. The GST Council, which will again be chaired by Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, is, according to media reports, considering a proposal to reduce the GST on food delivery charges by e-commerce operators, the likes of Swiggy and Zomato, from the current 18% to about 5% or so. Now, this effect is likely to come into place from the 1st of Jan. But again, this is just media reports right now. We don't have independent confirmation. But Andrew, how do you look at, let's say, stocks like Zomato and Swiggy, and are they going to be in a position to, let's say, claim tax credits on especially the overdue tax charges that have been slapped on a company like Zomato in excess of 800 crore rupees? How do you view India's overall e-commerce and food delivery app story, especially on listed companies like Zomato and Swiggy?
Yeah, but if the proposals you just said do come through, then obviously it's a huge benefit to these companies, and will only accelerate the growth, I think, for these companies at probably the detriment of the kind of traditional FMCG companies. And I think that's what the market's been telling us, hasn't it, over the past 6 to 9 months. It's been the new technology delivery type companies which have been doing very, very well. In terms of, if you even think about a year and a half ago, we used to kind of say, let them get to profitability or cash flow positive. And all of that is kind of, kind of happening now. But when you look at the FMCG companies, it's marred by, low revenue, margins under pressure. So there is a shift, I think, to these companies. But if there's a reduction in GST tax, then that would be a big positive for the whole sector.
Of course, a big positive for Gurgaon's richest man, Dipinder Goyal, at least. But let's move on to India's richest billionaires, Mukesh Ambani and Gautam Adani, who have both dropped out of the Bloomberg's $100 billion club for the year amidst ongoing business challenges. Now, despite this, India's top billionaires saw overall growth in their net worth in 2024. Ambani, whose wealth stood at $120.8 billion in July this year, when his son Anant Ambani got married, has experienced a decline due to underperformance in his conglomerate's energy and retail sectors. Now, as of December 13th, Ambani's fortune is now valued below $100 billion at about $96.7 billion, according to the Bloomberg Billionaire Index. Now, for Adani, the troubles are more deep in nature. His conglomerate is facing threat from the US Department of Justice probe that could freeze any momentum as uncertainty extends. Now, Adani's net worth has fallen from $122.3 billion in June to $82.1 billion, well below the $100 billion as per the Bloomberg Index. Now, I want to come to you, with this news, Andrew. There are obviously, issues that the US has found in the bribery case against Adani Enterprises. While I understand net worth is something that is completely dependent on the stock performance, but this ongoing US Department of Justice probe on Adani Enterprises, how do you view the Adani Enterprises stock story for investors? I'm not talking about traders who may enter, exit short positions today, tomorrow, but for long-term investors, how do you view the Adani story?
See, I can't really comment on individual companies in that respect, but generally, when these things happen, and it's happened across many different companies in the past as well, whether it's a SEBI inquiry or it's a tax inquiry, let the news come out first. Let's see exactly what's going to happen, rather than try and speculate on whether it's right, wrong, or whatever. So I think at this stage for investors, it's just wait for the news to come through. rather than take a view either side, because I don't think I'm in the know to even comment on some of this. It's all more legal, and it's got nothing to do with the fundamentals of the company.
Fair enough. We'll leave it at that. Andrew, thank you so much for taking time out this Tuesday morning and being here with us on News 9. Moving on, Ola Electric, the leading electric two-wheeler manufacturer in India, has made history by becoming the first EV maker in the country to achieve a 400,000 or 4 lakh retail sales in a single calendar year. According to the latest data on Vahan, Ola has recorded a total of 4,99,000 units sold this year. Now, this of course has hit the exceeded Ola's 300,000 units milestone, which it had achieved on the 9th of September. So that is the news coming in from Ola. Let's move on to Tata Steel. And Tata Steel has launched India's first all-women shift at its Noamundi iron mine in Jharkhand. This major initiative stressed upon the company's commitment to creating an equitable workplace and empowering women in traditionally male-dominated industries. The all-women shift will include female employees handling various mining activities, including operating heavy earth-moving machinery, shovels, loaders, drills, dozers, and shift supervision. Moving on. Sri Lanka and India have agreed to enhance their defense and energy ties, including the establishment of electricity grid connectivity and multi-product petroleum pipelines, as Prime Minister Narendra Modi has held extensive discussions with Sri Lankan President Anura Kumara Desinke. The Sri Lankan president, who arrived in New Delhi on Sunday for a 3-day official visit, is making his first foreign trip since taking office in September. In a joint press statement, Prime Minister Modi emphasized that both nations have agreed to focus on investment-led growth and connectivity as key pillars of their economic partnership, while physical, digital, and energy connectivity being central to the operation. And before we head into a break, in response to alarming pollution levels in Delhi, the Commission for Air Quality Management has reimposed Stage 4, that is Severe Plus measures, under the updated Graded Response Action Plan, or GRAP, to address the worsening air quality. The decision comes as Delhi's air quality index has crossed the 500 mark in certain areas on Monday night and Tuesday morning, indicating a severe pollution crisis. As part of the efforts to curb exposure, the Delhi Directorate of Education has directed all schools to adopt a hybrid learning mode for students up to 5th standard, effective immediately. And well, it's time for a break now, but on the other side, the updates from the stock markets and which are the stocks that you should look out for in today's trading session, with Avni Bhatt of JM Financial joining us on the show.
B6 Mahindra Electric Origin SUVs.
Hello. If your money is fraudulently taken by somebody or a cyber crime takes place with you,
क्या हम कृष्णा दास गुप्ता जी से बात कर रहे हैं?
And you report it to the bank within 3 days of the crime, the bank is liable to pay you 100%. This is clear-cut guidelines.
मैं डिपार्टमेंट से बात कर रहा हूँ.
If you report it within 7 days, the bank is liable to pay you 50%. And if you report it 21 days, I think 25% or something.
और हमने ये देखा है कि आपके आधार कार्ड से एक सिम रजिस्टर्ड हुआ है यहाँ.
If the person gives information within the span of 3 to 4 hours, 100% recovery can be done. I personally have seen a lot of cases where 100% recovery has been done.
आपका सिम यूज हुआ है, इलीगल एक्टिविटीज हुई हैं उस सिम से. Oh my God, मैडम, you are also involved in the Naresh Goyal money laundering case.
This and more. Streaming on News 9 Plus. News is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
Challenge is part of business.
Success to me means achieving a lot with limited resources.
It is the idea of bringing the best of East and West together.
Welcome back. You're watching Morning Brief at 9. I'm Karthik Malhotra, and a look at how the stock markets are faring this morning before we get you trading strategies which you should consider as you start your stock trades on this Tuesday morning. Let's look at how markets are opening today at 9:20 a.m. The Nifty and Sensex both opening in the red, down about 0.33% and just about 0.2% respectively, while you have the Nifty mid cap and small cap reflecting yesterday's opening trend, both opening in the green while the main indices happen to be in the red. The volatility has also increased about 2% or so, 2.5%, now standing at about 14.37% as we open trade this morning. Let's look at how stocks on the Nifty 50 heat map are performing, and a mixed bag there. We have big blotches of red on the banking BFSI space. We've got HDFC Bank and ICICI Bank both down, a flattish open for SBI, while pretty much good news coming for the IT sector, barring Infosys. All major IT stocks happen to be in the green this morning. We saw the auto space also open in the red yesterday. Pretty much the same momentum for the auto sector, barring Tata Motors and Hero MotoCorp, which happen to be in the green. Avni Bhatt, Senior Vice President at JM Financial, joining us this morning. Avni, what do you make of the market mood this Tuesday morning?
Good morning, Karthik, and a very good morning to all the viewers as well. So markets are in a very indecisive mode right now. Data points are suggesting fear in the market because of the volatile move that we saw on Friday. The confidence has come down, and if you plainly go by the options OI data, I think 24,700 is the point on Nifty which it has to cross. Only then, the positive sentiment will come back in the system. And till then, on the downside, the support is around 24,500. The another factor that is creating a lot of fear is the rise in India VIX. With no major correction yet, India VIX rising, that's a sentiment dampener. And that is why one more reason why I think for a couple of days more, markets will consolidate within a range. 24,500 to 24,800 is the range for Nifty. And Bank Nifty, 53,000 to 53,800. That is the range within which I think for this particular week, we should see some consolidation.
All right, consolidation in the forthcoming future is the word coming in from Avni Bhatt. Let's get into some stocks which happen to be in the news today, and let's get Avni's view on what your trading strategy on those stocks should be. Number one, the news item coming from HDFC Bank, and this is by way of the administrative warning which the market regulator SEBI has issued on HDFC Bank on non-compliance over certain provisions of the regulator. Avni, is this a stock that should be on a trader's or an investor's radar today?
So HDFC Bank has always been a slow mover, and it has already tested the resistance levels. So I think some bit of corrective action may be seen in the stock. but the overall broader structure is positive. Around 1840 is a good support level. So in case if we see some dip up to 1840, that should be a buying opportunity for the stock.
Okay, 1840. Right now the stock is at about 1865 on the trading monitors. 1840 seems to be an entry point on HDFC Bank. This is the view coming in from Avni. But let's move on, Avni, now to Reliance Industries. And Reliance Industries has continued to trail. In fact, if we look at the chart, in fact, it on a year-to-date basis, the stock has tanked about 2% or so. And it has reached now a point that which we were discussing earlier on the show, that Chairman Mukesh Ambani is no longer in the coveted list of the $100 billion club net worth. Avni, what should be the trading strategy on RIL today?
So unfortunately, Reliance is one of the favorite stocks that most investors hold, but it has disappointed quite a bit. And even currently, from a short-term trading perspective, there's a huge open interest built up at 1300 call. So I think it's going to be difficult for the stock to cross 1300 level in December series. Okay. And in fact, any move close to around 1290 on futures should be a selling opportunity with a stop loss of just 1305, 15 rupees stop loss. And we may see a downside up to around 1230.
A downside of up to 1230. Okay, well, let's move on now, Avni. Not good news coming in even for the Adani Group, because the United States prosecutors say they have found more documents in the fraud case against Gautam Adani in the ongoing bribery charges. Now, Adani Enterprises stock has been under pressure all year, down about 14% or down by about 400 rupees this calendar year alone. Avni, how should investors view this?
So Adani Enterprise has been in a range. I mean, it saw some recovery after that huge fall. But then after that, it has been consolidating in a very, very narrow range. And currently also it's in a no trading zone. So I think one should just wait and watch. Let either the breakout happen or a breakdown happen for any kind of long or a short trade. Currently, it's in an absolutely no trading zone.
No trading zone. Okay, so hold on to that stock if you have it in your portfolio. Is that the word coming in from you, Avni?
Yes, you can hold on to the stock because the bottom is done. It's just that it's going to take some time for the momentum to pick up on the upside.
All right, so hold on to the stock and wait for the momentum to build. Let's move on, Avni, now to Vedanta. Well, the Vedanta Board of Directors yesterday have approved the fourth interim dividend of 8 rupees 50 paisa per share, which will cost the company over 3,000 crore rupees. Should this stock be on the radar today? It was on most people's watch list yesterday, awaiting the dividend decision. Avni, should this stock be on the radar today as well?
100% Karthik. So we keep talking about buying on dips, and this is the dip that we are getting. It's a good opportunity. Around 501, 502 is a very good support level. If the stock sees some more downside today up to around 502, you should be entering into the stock.
Okay, enter the stock at 502 levels. Let's move on now to another stock which is in the news, and this comes by way of the aviation sector. Well, aviation sector woes get even more fraught now with SpiceJet management now asked to appear before the Delhi High Court in compliance of payments of over $6 lakh or $0.6 million to aircraft engine lessors. Will this news item have any impact on the stock today, Avni? I'm talking about SpiceJet.
Not really, because I don't see any excitement in the stock in spite of the news, neither on the long side nor on the short side. In fact, at higher levels, we are seeing a lot of selling pressure. So until and unless the stock crosses 60 level, one should avoid taking any trade in this particular stock.
Okay, avoid taking any position on the SpiceJet trading call, at least on the SpiceJet stock today. Let's move on, Avni, now to Wipro. Wipro also happens to be in the news, and the IT major has acquired a 100% stake in Applied Value Technologies and its affiliates for $40 million. Should Wipro be on your trading view today, and what should the street view on this development be, Avni?
Wipro, definite buy. One should be holding the stock in the portfolio. It's a slow, gradual, silently it has moved up quite a lot, and it has given a fresh breakout. If you look at the a little longer term charts also, it has been an uptrend, and any dips in this particular stock, they have been short-lived, and buying is clearly seen at lower levels. So it's a slow mover. One cannot expect a good momentum trading in this for a day or two or intraday trading, but one should hold in the portfolio. The upside for December series is up to around 320, but if you can hold it for a little longer period, I think the stock is heading towards around 360.
Heading around 360 from about 310 on the trading charts today. Avni, I want to actually spend a minute more on the IT sector stocks in general. And if you look at the trading action today, you see that the IT sector is pretty much a green bag, with Infosys being the only IT major stock in the red on the Nifty 50 today. What's really going on in the IT pack? Is this to do with the US Fed's FOMC, which is likely to begin, in fact slated to begin later today India time, or is there something else that we should read into the tech space, especially the stock of Wipro, TCS and Infosys?
So IT was a very beaten down sector, and for a pretty long time it just consolidated in a range. And after this breakout happened, which the breakout level was somewhere around 43,600. After that, the rally has just started. So in my view, IT sector is going to do going to give you much more returns from current levels. We are expecting a move up to around 48,000 on the index. Okay. And selectively on rotational basis, you'll see the stocks also moving one by one.
Okay, but anything in particular which is driving Infosys down this morning? What are you seeing on your charts on Infosys?
So Infosys, see again, the dip that we keep waiting for. This is the level that is a good entry point. Okay. I think Infosys will also see a catch-up rally.
Okay, Infosys will also see a catch-up rally. Let's move on now to another news item, and stocks in news therefore become yet again Zomato and Swiggy. And these stocks perhaps need to be looked at this morning because media reports are now suggesting, Avni, that the upcoming GST Council meet may actually reduce GST on food delivery from 18% to about 5%. Now, this will make food order deliveries cheaper for consumers and may offset the tax liability on service providers Zomato and Swiggy. Remember, Zomato was last week also served with a hot GST demand notice of 800 crore rupees. So, Avni, what is your view on Zomato and Swiggy this morning?
So, look at the way how fantastically the stock has digested the entire negative news.
I like the wordplay there.
And last week it tested the short-term 20-day exponential moving average on daily charts, and it reversed from that. Right. So, I think the upside should continue up to 305 from a trading perspective. If volumes also pick up, then I think we are heading towards 320. A breakout should happen. A new all-time high should be seen on the stock. It's a good stock to accumulate, as well as from current levels. Even for momentum trading, one can buy the stock for a target of 305 and keep a stop loss of 288.
Okay, a target of 305 and a stop loss of 288 on Zomato. What about Swiggy? Well, it's a new listing, Avni, not too much historic data available in that sense, but any view that you have on Swiggy right now?
So as you rightly said, it's a newly listed company, so not much of data. It wouldn't be right to see the stock technically. But if I just look at the intraday charts, 628 is where the stock is heading.
28 is where the stock is heading on the charts. That is the view coming in from Avni this morning. Avni, but always a pleasure having you right here on News 9 Live with us, and we hope to see you keep coming back on our channel. But thank you so much for all your inputs this Tuesday trading session. All right, with that, let's head into a short break. On the other side of the break, we will bring you all the stories that are going to be making headlines in the world of business from all over the globe. But let's look at what these stories are with the global headlines. Cryptocurrency Bitcoin has hit a new high of $107,000 apiece amid Donald Trump's strategic reserve announcement. MicroStrategy joins Nasdaq 100 index, boosts Bitcoin exposure with a 550% stock surge. Gold prices rise as US dollar weakens ahead of Fed meeting, safe haven demand grows. Donald Trump and SoftBank CEO have announced a $100 billion US investment by the Japanese major to drive tech and jobs growth. Donald Trump's transition team pushes for major electric vehicle policy changes, targets Chinese imports. Meanwhile, US's neighbor Canada has reinforced border security amid Donald Trump's threatened tariff on imports from Canada. And in India's neighborhood, Pakistan's central bank has cut key interest rates by 200 basis points or 2 full percentages to stimulate growth in the ailing economy. Meanwhile, neighbor on the other side, China's housing market shows signs of recovery with slowest price decline in 17 months. And moving to Europe, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz loses the no confidence vote, sparking political instability in Europe's largest economy. All these stories on the other side of this very short break.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi became the first Indian Prime Minister in over 41 years to visit Austria.
The visit of Prime Minister Modi to Vienna this July was hugely important. The Migration and Mobility Agreement that entered into force in September 23, for us a very important step in our bilateral relationship. India has a very crucial role to play. Our relationship has really intensified.
So how is this cultural connect shaping?
A long tradition of Sanskrit studies in Austria, at Vienna University in fact, since 1845. There have been Sanskrit studies at the University of Vienna.
Welcome back. You're watching Morning Brief at 9. Let's move on to all the global stories in news today. Let's begin with Bitcoin. Well, the world's leading cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, has reached a new milestone on Monday US time, soaring to a record high of over 107,000 US dollars apiece. The surge was boosted by US President-elect Donald Trump's announcement that he plans to create a US Bitcoin strategic reserve similar to the country's oil reserve, which has encouraged cryptocurrency investors. Investor sentiment was also boosted by the inclusion of MicroStrategy into Nasdaq 100 index, a move expected to bring more investments into the software company, which has made major Bitcoin purchases. At its peak, Bitcoin hit $107,148, $107,148 before settling up at a little below the 107,000 mark at $106,877, up 5.43% from Friday's close. Meanwhile, Ethereum, the second largest cryptocurrency, saw a modest gain, rising just 1.85% to about $3,975 apiece. Remember, despite skepticism from the Fed Reserve Chair Jerome Powell, Bitcoin's value has surged over 50% since Trump's election. Investors are now eyeing the $110,000 mark for the Bitcoin. And staying with that story, shares of MicroStrategy jumped over 6% as the software company joined the Nasdaq 100 index, providing indirect exposure to Bitcoin. MicroStrategy stock has soared nearly 550% this year, 2024, with its market value now exceeding $100 billion, more than double its Bitcoin holdings. Take a look.
Shares of MicroStrategy jumped more than 6% on Monday as the software company and Bitcoin buyer was set to join the Nasdaq 100. Its inclusion gives the roughly $26 trillion index indirect exposure to Bitcoin. The addition comes as Bitcoin crossed $107,000 on Monday to hit another record high, now up more than 150% for the year. The prospect of more buying from funds that track the Nasdaq 100 could further boost MicroStrategy's stock, which has surged nearly 550% this year alongside a jump in Bitcoin. MicroStrategy, a money-losing software company, adopted Bitcoin as its treasury asset in 2020 under the leadership of co-founder Michael Saylor. In the 4 years since, the company's shares have skyrocketed 3,200%. MicroStrategy's market value is now over $100 billion, more than twice the value of its Bitcoin stockpile.
All right, and some say Bitcoin could be the new gold. Let's go to the old gold. Gold prices saw an uptick as the US dollar weakened, driven by investor expectations ahead of the Fed Reserve's policy meeting, FOMC, starting later today. With inflation concerns and global economic uncertainties, investors are increasingly looking at gold as a safe haven asset. The dollar's decline ahead of the meeting, where the Fed is expected to maintain its cautious stance on interest rates, has added to the appeal of gold. The precious metal's value is now on track to post its strongest weekly gain in weeks. Analysts are closely watching the Fed's upcoming moves, as any signal towards easing monetary policy could provide further support for gold prices in the short term. US President-elect Donald Trump and SoftBank CEO Masayoshi Son have joined forces to announce a major $100 billion investment into the United States. The focus of the initiative will be on boosting tech innovation, infra development, and job creation in key industries like artificial intelligence, renewable energy, and telecom. This ambitious investment aims to not only foster economic growth, but also reduce US's dependence on foreign technology and create thousands of new jobs across the US. Remember, this partnership also highlights both leaders' commitments to advancing economic progress, though it will be closely scrutinized by both political and business leaders as to how it will impact the future of the American industry.
So, ladies and gentlemen, this is Masa of SoftBank from Japan, and he's just agreed to invest $50 billion in the United States and 50,000 jobs. And he's one of the great men of industry, so I just want to thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
This is one.
And you, if you'd like to speak to him, you can. But one of the truly great men. Thank you.
All right, let's stay with Donald Trump. Well, US President-elect's transition team is advocating for major changes to the US electric vehicle policies, recommending the reduction of support for EVs and charging stations. Additionally, they're pushing to strengthen measures that block the import of Chinese-made cars, components, and battery materials into the US. These recommendations come amid a slowdown in the US EV transition and the rise of China's heavily subsidized EV cars, which benefit from its robust battery supply chain. Remember, throughout his campaign, Trump pledged to ease regulations on fossil fuel vehicles or ICE engines and roll back President Joe Biden's EV mandate. And China is Canada is stepping up efforts to prevent a surge in border crossings as US President-elect Donald Trump threatens to impose new tariffs on Canadian imports. In response, Canadian officials are reinforcing border security and working to ease tensions over trade. The political tariffs or the potential tariffs could impact the economy, prompting Canada to explore alternative trade strategies. Take a look.
To stop vehicles bearing migrants from barreling across the Canadian border into the United States, blocks like these have been installed on rural roads that intersect the border. But Royal Canadian Mounted Police Sergeant Daniel Dubois explains they aren't a fail-safe solution.
People can still hop over them.
Managing the world's longest land border at about 4,000 miles is a tough job. But it's also one now in the spotlight after US President-elect Donald Trump threatened Canada and Mexico with sweeping 25% tariffs if they do not reduce the movement of migrants and drugs into the US. Canadian police say that over the past 4 years they've been installing cameras and sensors along this section over the border.
But for us, we typically will not arrest a migrant.
But officials like Charles Poirier acknowledge they are limited in what they can do to stop southbound migrants who are typically in Canada legally.
Well, here's the thing. They haven't committed an offense until they've crossed into the United States. So our focus for the past few months, and actually the past year and a half, has been on arresting and prosecuting the smugglers.
4 migration experts Reuters spoke with were unsure how new border security technology and equipment would prevent crossings. Canadian politicians admit the show of border strength is about creating an impression of security.
Push people to cross through.
And refugee advocates like Carlos Rojas Salazar argue the restrictions do not deter migrants.
When you try to cross a border, the only thing that you do is that you are pushing people to risk it. And you are increasing the royalties that the organized crime are getting.
Most migrants at the border are heading from Canada to the US and not the other way around. Canadian authorities caught 1,000 people trying to cross into Canada between formal crossings in the 12 months ending in October, according to data obtained by Reuters. That's compared to more than 23,000 apprehended on the US side by US Customs and Border Patrol. That also represents a tiny fraction of the 1.5 million apprehensions over the same period near the US-Mexico border. American Terry Rowe lives on the New York side of the border. He says his motion sensing cameras regularly film migrants crossing the border on foot, mostly towards the US.
It makes us a little nervous.
Yeah.
You know, when it's 70 feet from your bedroom window. I mean, we keep our doors locked.
But recently, he has noticed more heading north towards Canadian soil. Canadian law enforcement are also bracing for a potential influx of migrants fleeing Trump's threat to carry out mass deportations once he is in the White House. They say they have redeployed officers across the border to try prevent a surge.
Fear might drive some people into fleeing the United States and coming to Canada, hoping for a better future. So we had to be ready, and we are ready.
All right, let's move on to Asia now. Pakistan's central bank has announced a major 200 basis points cut in its key interest rate, marking the 5th consecutive reduction this year. This move, which brings the policy rate to 10.5%, still is part of the government's effort to stimulate economic growth amid rising inflation and challenging fiscal environment. The central bank's decision reflects its attempt to boost consumer spending and investment, although concerns about inflationary pressures remain high. The latest rate cut follows a series of measures aimed at stabilizing Pakistan's economy, which has been struggling with a large trade deficit and rising debt. Meanwhile, China's housing market has shown signs of recovery, with the country's home prices experiencing their slowest decline in 17 months. According to a recent data published, China's home prices fell by just 0.5% in November, marking a significant slowdown in the previously steep downward trend. This is seen as a positive development for China's struggling property sector, which has been facing major challenges due to high debt levels, government regulations and weak demand. While the recovery remains fragile, the easing of price declines signals that the government's efforts to stabilize the real estate market, including policy adjustments and interest rate cuts, may be starting to take effect. And let's end with a story coming in from Europe's largest economy, Germany. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has lost a no-confidence vote in Parliament, marking a major blow to his leadership and plunging the country into political uncertainty. The vote, fueled by mounting challenges and dissatisfaction with his government, has shifted momentum towards opposition parties. The setback threatens the stability of Scholz's administration, with concerns growing over the future of key domestic and foreign policy initiatives. The loss puts Germany at a crossroads. Political negotiations continue, and the nation faces the possibility of a leadership crisis. And that's all we have on the morning brief at 9. News and updates continue right here on News 9 Live. Stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. Thanks so much for watching.
For a reason tonight.
Will it change the shape of American foreign policy? Violence has erupted in Manipur once again. How can we pass judgment, sir, before any inquiry that, they were volunteers or militants, sir?